Hey everyone, Refs here for another video. I want to make a party formation guide to help you figure out your own teams, so in this video I'm focusing on classes rather than specific characters. I went on a mission to determine which classes are truly essential for successful parties. After digging into the mechanics and quality of life improvements each class brings, I have identified the real must-haves. So let's dive in. First, let's talk about why Thieves are absolutely vital. Thieves boast the highest dexterity stat among all base classes, which directly impacts both Disarm Trap and Evade Trap. In practice, this means your party triggers far less traps, like spikes, and can open treasure chests more safely, with 3 chances to disarm instead of just 2. In other words, having a thief on your team helps you conserve resources like fortitude and mana, and also makes dungeon exploration much smoother. Thieves are flexible in terms of positioning. You can place them in a front row if your back row is already full. Equipping a sword or dagger with a shield allows you to gain more substats by using 2 gear slots. Alternatively, you can place them in the back row with a bow for a strong, high damage single hit, especially good for openings. The takeaway here is that every team should include at least one thief. The quality of life boost from trap management and safer treasure acquisition is too valuable to skip. Next up is why Priest is essential. Priests are pretty straightforward. With high Piety, they can fully heal your entire party, drastically reducing how often you get to use Ints and Rest. On top of healing, Priests also provide powerful buffs like increased evasion, accuracy, and surety, which can make all the difference for your frontline. A well-timed buff can be the difference between life and death. Priests are typically placed in the back row, wielding two-handed staves to avoid taking direct hits. While it's possible to run a priest in the front row with a two-handed mace, that build sacrifices piety, and therefore healing power. Plus, if you're using only one priest, you won't have many spare turns to attack anyway. I only recommend putting a priest up front if you're using 2 of them. The key takeaway is that without a reliable healer or buffer like a priest, your runs will likely stall, especially on the later Abyss floors where enemy becomes more accurate and evasive. Now let's talk about why a mage, or any class with high intelligence, is crucial. Mages shine not just because of their raw magic damage, but also because of the IQ stat that impacts the detect mechanic. This determines your chance to reveal enemies on the map before combat begins. With a high IQ mage scouting ahead, you can avoid ambushes. Knowing enemy positions also gives you some very useful tactical advantages. Mages also bring some of the strongest spells in the game. Roll-wide sleep, full party magic damage reduction, and of course the infamous nukes that can wipe entire waves. They are usually placed in a back row with a two-handed staff, but you can also go off meta and run them in the front row with a shield and an IQ scaling dagger, but that's definitely a niche strategy. The key takeaway here is that a mage is not just your damage dealer, they are also your scout. Controlling the pace of battles starts with knowing where enemies are. Let's move on to the main character, who is mandatory in your party. Picking their class is a critical decision. I recommend selecting either a fighter or a thief. Avoid mage or priest for the MC, since there are plenty of strong character options for those roles. We also want the MC to deal damage, so I also advise against using knight, as it's more of a tank class. That said, you should still level all available classes with your MC eventually, since doing so unlocks valuable stats, skills, and spells. Most of the time, you'll place your MC in the front row, armed with a sword or dagger and a shield. However, if you enjoy experimenting, you could go for a back row build using bows or two-handed spears, offering a more defensive playstyle to survive tough fights. Now that we have covered the essential roles, here's the core classes. You need a thief, priest, and mage. That leaves you with either 2 or 3 open slots, depending on whether your MC is acting as your thief, so you have 3 slots, or a fighter, with 2 slots left. In the remaining slots, you generally want to include your strongest DPS characters, as the faster you eliminate enemies, the less pressure you put on your healers and tanks. On higher Abyss floors, enemies often cast annoying debuffs, so it's also an option to bring a second priest or a character that has passed through priest class changing to help manage that. For early to mid game, I recommend a mage focused party. Run 2 mages and 1 priest in the back row, with your MC and 2 physical DPS in the front row. Mages are fantastic for AoE damage and exploiting elemental weaknesses. Plus, you don't need to worry much about undead resistance or faction penalties. In the endgame, physical damage dealers tend to rise in power again. At that point, you can farm specific weapons that deal bonus damage to different elements and factions, and you'll also be able to swap gear mid-battle without penalty. Once you have the gear and knowledge of enemy weakness, drop one of your mages and run Thief, Mage, and Priest in the back, with your MC and 2 DPS units in front. These are just my personal insights and suggestions. Feel free to experiment. I have not covered legendary only classes here, since they are generally self-explanatory, and honestly I don't have them. The possibilities for team building are endless, and at the end of the day, if you are happy with your party, that's what really matters. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have fun building your squads, and as always, happy grinding!